All right, Dave, I'm playing a desert nomad who's a master of survival in his homeland.
But Ted, we're playing a salt marsh campaign.
Uh, Dave, that would have been really great to know beforehand. I want my character choices to actually matter here.
Well, let's discuss DM tips making player choices matter. Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and as usual, I'm joined by this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Make D&D content flow through your YouTube feed by hitting that subscribe button.
And if it's more Nerdarchy that you're after, then you want to ring that notification bell. Ding ding.
So today we're going to be talking about player choices. This is a DM tip video, but there's also some advice for players in here too, and some takeaways for sure. Before we start, let us mention our sponsor, Dungeon Fog. Dungeon Fog is a great tool for building and making maps for your games, whether it's dungeons, on a ship, underground, cities, overland. It doesn't matter. Over on Dungeon Fog, they have you covered. It's great. I love using it. It makes me feel like a kid again, drawing on graph paper, making my maps, but my maps never look so good.
Yeah, it's really great. If you're really into making maps, there's a load of tools, but if you're not, there's a whole bunch of already made maps ready to go, easily customizable. Dave's been using them for our home games, which we've been, playing online. So he's just, added that second, feature in there, sharing screens. It's got the dungeon fog, so he can cover the rooms so that, the fog of war, if you will, to cover rooms that we haven't gotten into or unable to see yet. It's super helpful. It's super awesome.
Yep, and they have different licenses, including free, so it'll cost you nothing to go check it out. Link in the description.
All right, so this is a video that, I kind of brought up, and it actually has to, to do with, you and I have been gaming for a long time. Both of our DMing styles have changed throughout the years, and I'm watching the Scarlet Sisterhood, and I see, some of the stuff that you've been doing, and I'm like, Dave is the kind of DM that he really sees my characters or my players are making these kind of character decisions. So this is the material that I'm gonna prep for. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna put this one on the docket. We're gonna talk about this because I think it's really important for DMs to understand.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the joys for DMing for me, and is taking my players' choices and making them matter in the game and trying to incorporate some of them into the game. And we're going to get into that even a little more deeper, but let's start off with, what exactly do we mean by when we say player choices? I mean, are you talking about the choices that people make, during gameplay or character creation, somewhere's in between?
Well, I mean, everything really should matter, but for this one, I was approaching this from a mechanical standpoint. If I choose a race, regardless of what that is, if the DM knows why I want to be a goblin, okay, we're gonna make you, we're gonna make you play a goblin, or you're gonna play a goblin, and you want to be different. You want to be able to stand out. You are fully accepting that it could be problematic for you to enter into some societies. Oh, I want to play your homebrew race because I've never seen it before. I want to experience everything there is about this race. All right, let's make that happen. And you can get into those nitty-gritty things for every single type of choice, race, class, language, all of that stuff. It should be brought into the game when the players make those choices.
So is it the Dungeons Master's responsibility to know all the players' choices?
This is where it gets really difficult. It's not feasible for the DM to remember every little choice. But if the barbarian who's fighting with a great weapon and constantly saying, okay, I've got, great weapon master, and I'm taking -5 to do +10 to damage, and I'm always missing because you're constantly using high AC monsters, well, then the DM isn't taking into account the style character that I have chosen to play. You want, if your players are doing that, you want to make that stand out. You want to make that shine. Every so often, you want to have monsters that have a ton of hit points and a low armor class, so they can really feel like, they're slogging away, through this mess by taking out huge chunks with every swing of that great axe.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an area. Also, as a dungeon master, like you'll never be able to incorporate all the choices your players make. So pick and choose. If something starts to stand out as something that seems important to the player, you can incorporate that and try and bounce. I try and bounce from player to player to shift the focus and make sure I'm getting all their choices. While it's cool to do this mechanically, I think it's also cool to observe the kind of choices they make during play as well and incorporate that kind of stuff into your game. Also, I would argue the fact that like a low AC monster without a ton of hit points could be equally fun for that barbarian, because getting to smash through them from time to time, maybe you just add more knowing that they're going to be wreaking havoc on the battlefield, would scratch that particular itch, and also maybe make them feel a little more epic by just having more monsters that they get to use this ability on over and over again.
Yeah, if you've got the ability to plow through a horde of orc warriors, cutting down, one or two with every swing, if, they've got, some ability to cleave through, it definitely will make that character remember that session. Even if that encounter wasn't something that was designed to be, epic, it's going to be for that character. And I've been in situations where I remember my character doing something fantastic. Even though I used a high-level spell slot to mow down a horde of very underpowerful monsters, it was still like, yeah, I did that with my blade barrier. It was awesome. Most of the enemies just did not have a chance to survive. This was fantastic.
So I also offer the question up of what is the player's responsibility in making their choices matter?
So here's where, we enter into a dialogue. Typically, from my experience, when I'm playing a game, my dungeon masters, my fellow players are my friends. They're people that I'm going to want to have conversations with. And throughout my decades worth of gaming, I have had long conversations with DMs on the phone, in person, or over the PC of just, hey, this is what I'm looking for. You can share the information. You can tell your DMs, hey, is it possible to put X into the game? My character took the linguist feat. It would be really cool if I could, try to break ciphers, or I would like to discover, a hidden language, or, some unknown language that hasn't been, seen in centuries or millennia. This would be really cool for my character to find out. Whatever is important to you, you can step away from the table. You can have a conversation and say, hey, can I make sure, or can you make sure this enters into the game? It's not always the DM's responsibility to observe, record, and remember to put in there.
If you made particular choices in designing your character, making your character that are important to you and you care about, then you as the player should try and challenge the GM to use them by trying to use them, right? Like if there's a particular circumstance that comes up, you know what, you're in this church, this really old church with stained glass windows that seems like it would be a little bit more rare, and your character's a glassblower, right? They have that skill, those tools, and maybe that's even like part of their background. They were a guild artisan. Like, hey, do I know anything about the artist of these stained glass, right? And if you do that one or two times, the DM's going to be like, oh, that's important to the player. Or on the fly, they might just start making up stuff with it, give it some more background. Like it may have some more significance in the game than it did before, because you've cued the GM in on, oh, this is interesting and important to this particular player because they mentioned it. So maybe I should do something with that. So there's other ways inside the game that you can also kind of signal to the DM and to the group that I have interest in these particular things. If you took the linguist feat, like Ted say, every time you go to town, you're going to go to the library, or you're in a new town or city, you want to find the libraries because you want to find books with more languages or dead languages on them. And if you start doing this, the DM might just be like, oh, you know what? Maybe the next town I should just plan something special based around that, because I know this player is going to do that because they always do that.
Yeah.
So as a GM, take notice of when your players are doing these things, but as a player, do these things. Don't keep them a secret and hope the DM is just going to know that this is important to you and you want to know. It's a two-way street, and we can do it both in-game and out-of-game. We can have some of this stuff come up in session 0. If it's important for you to explore some of these things, then, I find session 0, a lot of DMs will be like, hey, is there any particular thing you want to see in this game or not in this game? Well, this is your chance to say, here's some things that I think would be really cool as a player.
So this falls under the ask informative questions. As Dave says, if you've got something specific, ask about it. With the linguist, beyond the library, you could be inquisitive amongst, people in town. Oh, any interesting travelers come by. When you look in the town, for the first time, you're looking for things that are going to stand out. You're looking for individuals who might be in possession of languages that you might be looking to learn. And you know what? The Genasi might happen to, be able to teach you a little bit of primordial, enough to get you started for now, and, what have you. So you look for these kinds of things, and eventually, when you find one, you latch on and you say, hey, blah, 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 blah. And you get those balls moving. You get the ball rolling, so to speak.
So let's drill down a little bit now and talk about what choices of the players should the DM or GM be paying attention to.
So I kind of mentioned in the beginning, that the character race is going to be telling to some degree, but it's not going to be a major issue over the course of the whole campaign, but it is going to be telling you something. My son loves Dragonborn because he loves dragons, so he always goes in that direction. So it's like, all right, what is it about that choice that is so appealing? Is it a mechanical thing? Is it just, he wants to be a dragon and, you really can't, play as a dragon? So you look for those kind of elements of why is that choice important?
Yeah. So looking towards, your player's race, their background, class, languages, spells, feats, all of these can be fairly informative, but some of them are very kind of like microcosmic in nature, like knowing all their spell choices. But if they start using certain spells a lot, you might incorporate different ways for them to use those spells by creating situations maybe they didn't think about, but you're like, you know what? They keep casting, I don't know, telekinesis or whatever the spell is. I'm just pulling one out of my butt here, right? And so you're like, well, might be some interesting uses for this spell? Because I know they're going to use it. They always use it. So you could throw that out there to make that choice important. Sometimes you can go the other way too, where you can deny them a certain thing that they use a lot.
Well, I was actually going to bring that up. Watching the Scarlet Sisterhood, Kenna, Megan's character, uses invisibility and greater invisibility all the time. So, like, at some point in time, they were fighting a villain, and the villain hit them with a spell. And I sat there and I'm like, all right, I don't understand. Dave knew that they were invisible, and the game has been out for a while, so if this is a spoiler alert, I apologize. But it turns out that that villain had a monocle that could see invisibility. So that choice did make a difference in the game, and it's been very useful, and you've given lots of opportunities for that invisibility to matter, setting up stings and ambushes and the like. But on the opposite side, the decision or it did matter because now they've beat a villain and acquired a new magic item that actually is giving the party an asset that when Kenna is invisible, Deneen can actually still see her and be able to bless her.
Yeah, so like that was the double whammy. I didn't even remember that, to be honest with you. I ran that campaign a while. That was a double whammy. Like I made her choice matter in the sense that when they made the choice, I denied it to them, right? But later on,
yes,
I made it more of an asset to the players. So like it's okay to do stuff like that, but it's like it should be a give and take. You don't want to just be constantly like penalizing your players. But that's just a couple examples of how those things can matter. Class is a great one. If they're playing a warlock, for instance, like they're beholden to their patron, to this otherworldly being. Is that going to come up? Make that choice matter. Make warlocks in your game, mean something. It's not just flavor. They should kind of be beholden to that entity. That entity might get angry if they're not fulfilling their end of the bargain.
Really, any of your I serve a greater being, your clerics, your druids, your warlocks, all of these things have an alternate power source, to some extent, and depending upon how you want to play them in your world. But I mean, you can literally have a conversation with the source of your power. Very early on in my Thursday game over on Mini Terrain Domain with the Dawnbringers, I actually got to, have a conversation with the avatar of my deity. I met Moradin. Holy crap, I'm a first level cleric talking to my god. This is kind of uber powerful. I don't know how to feel about that, but you can bring these elements in and incorporate them within your story so that it's quite clear to the character or to the player and the character, that the decisions that were made to go down these roads makes a difference.
So if you enjoyed this GM tips and you want more DM tips, we've got a whole playlist of them you can check out up here.
Are you looking to get some more Nerdarchy content? Then you might want to check us out over on Patreon.
You'll find maps from our games, magic item cards, other 5e contents for players and DMs alike, and more.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.